The real news. A story I want to share with you. Sitting in the outer office, Jane Bradley fought a yawn, realizing how tired she was. At 32, she was attractive, slender, and conceited. She loved her fast-paced job as a TV news reporter, and she always dressed perfectly. She had a bad habit of licking her lips with her tongue. Leaning back in her chair, her head was against the wall. Closing her deep-set brown eyes, she heard the conversation in her boss's office. Noticing nearby Gina, his secretary, working at a computer, Jane didn't move. Then Gina got up and smiled at Jane, nodding, walking away with an empty coffee cup. "She's the best, Mr. Samuels," she heard her boss's familiar low voice. "No doubt, but she's getting too close." Samuel's voice was heard and sounded like it was in a box, and Jane concluded that it was a Skype call because no one else was in the room. "We're friends. I hate to..." Dean sighed. Impatiently, Samuel interrupted him. "You know the drill. Hard news with the highest fear factor first, then the soft stuff." "I know, problem-solution reaction." "Shh! Keep your voice down." Making faces, Jane wondered who and what they were talking about. "It won't be long," Samuel's voice was very stern. "We have big plans when everything shifts." "They're all a good team." "I hate the deception." Dean's voice was depressed. "Keep it up and you'll make it to corporate." "Gotta go." "Okay, thanks, Mr. Samuel." There was silence, and perking up, Jane heard his footsteps near the door. She jumped up and stood near the outer door to the office, giving the impression that she was just coming in. Then Dean Hanson poked his head out the door. "Gina, I have a meeting." "Oh, Jane, that's right. Come on in." She went someplace. Jane just shrugged it into a small but neat office. In his 50s, Dean wasn't nice-looking, but the high-strung, nervous type, because he was the manager of the television network news station in Houston, a large major market. He shut the door to his office and motioned Jane to sit down, and he sat behind his desk. "How's Billy doing?" he asked, preoccupied with how to handle Jane, his star reporter. "He'll pull through." Jane noticed her folder and flash drive on his desk in front of him. He had to approve all the stories before they were aired. "That was a terrible accident. Glad he survived." He opened the folder and looking at the surveys and scientific studies he had already reviewed. "He should have had his brakes checked," and Dean sighed, rubbing his chin. "Brakes?" Jane perked up. The police had said nothing about that brakes, she thought. And Dean looked at her. "Wasn't it an older car that he was driving?" His own car. 2011 Civic, I think." "He's our best cameraman." Dean finally looked at Jane. He thought she was very attractive, but knew she was stuck on herself and conceited. They had become friends. "Yes, we've worked together for almost 3 years now." Jane became defensive and wondered what he was up to. She had submitted her feature on medication in the classroom. Shaking his head, Dean clutched the flash drive and pouted. "I can't air this, Jane." "What?" She perked up in total disbelief. It had never happened to her before. "Why not?" "We worked on that for almost 6 weeks. It needs to be aired. The vaccines and fluorides are ruining our kids' health. They actually make the kids sick." "Dean, I don't understand." He kept shaking his head. "Did you thoroughly check out Dr. Ransom and this Philip Newton, whoever he is? These studies?" He stared at the reports. "Yes," she answered. "A Google search? Not good enough, Jane. I'm disappointed in you." He couldn't look at her and had to lie because his boss told him to put her down. Dean thought her story was excellent and her best work. "What?" Jane stared at him, confused, blinking and licking her lips. She gripped the chair arms tightly, getting upset. "Dean, what's going on here?" "You can do better than this." He tore up some of the paperwork in the folder. "I worked hard on that story. Ransom and Newton have been making studies on medication abuse and misuse on children for 7 years. It's true. Everyone needs to know this." "Are you going to give me the rest of your sources?" He clutched the flash drive, ready to toss it. "Who assigned you the story, Hank?" And Jane took the initiative to do the story herself, with a hint from Nick, her boyfriend. And Billy helped her with it. "You did this on your own? On company time?" Dean stared at her, and she didn't know what to say. "You can't do that." You signed a contract to only develop news stories assigned to you. He kept rubbing his chin and mouth, hating what he was doing. I can fire you for this. He dropped the flash drive in the trash near his desk. What? Licking her lips, Jane kept shaking her head, confused. Where'd you get the idea? Your boyfriend Nick, with all these crazy ideas? Please, Dean, what's going on here? And wasn't my story on Granny Simpson, who was saved by that kid from a rabid dog last month? What happened to it? The school shooting? You know had priority to air first. Well, that's my point, Jane got angry. I'll bet that kid that pulled the trigger was on medication. She was ready to leave and noticed the trash can. She wanted her report back. Dean wasn't sure what to tell her. It's more important to keep them... He stopped himself from saying too much. To keep who from what? Jane stared at him. I thought we were here to inform the public, not scare them all the time. And Liz, your daughter, is gifted, not autistic. Dean stared at her, surprised with that, as she left. How much did she know? And she also hit a nerve about his daughter. He didn't call the shots, but the people above him told him what to air. And if he didn't, they could threaten his family. Disgusted, Jane threw her arms up and slammed the door shut behind her on her way out. In the outer office, she looked at heavyset Gina, Dean's secretary. Dean stuck his head out the door, seeing Gina. Gina, I have a meeting with Sam Fuller, a new sponsor, Decker Pharmaceuticals. Be back in an hour. And going around the corner, Jane heard him and stopped. She looked over her shoulder, seeing Dean put his suit jacket on and walk out. Jane didn't move, thinking she wanted her report back. Hiding her computer tablet in her hand, she stepped back over to Gina. Oh, Gina, I left my pad in his office. Just gonna go grab it. In her 40s and chewing gum, Gina nodded to her. Quickly, Jane rushed into the office and rummaged through the full trash can. She found her flash drive and some of her paperwork, and with no pocket, she stuffed everything down her blouse and hid the flash drive under her pad. She rushed out, showing Gina her tablet. Quickly, she rushed through the TV news studio to a little corner and a small desk dressing table. Several co-workers were setting up for the evening news. Jane quickly dumped everything in her large handbag. Then she heard her cell phone ring from the bag, and she had to dig in for it. It was her boyfriend, Nick. Nick, what do you want? Upset, she snapped at him. What kind of greeting is that? His irritated voice was heard. Well, it's not a good day. Oh, he said. Can we get together after you get off? We need to talk. I thought you were rehearsing. No, the tour's been postponed. I've got news for you. Nick was a struggling singer-musician. Nick, please, I don't want to hear about your UFO dimensions conspiracy stuff. It's important. It's about your station, KHOU. And then Jane heard a buzzing from another call on her phone. Nick, I gotta go. Another call's coming in. She hung up on him and took the other call. Hello? She listened. Hello? Who is it? It sounded like the phone was being passed to someone. Who? Billy, is that you? Then she heard his weak, strained voice. Please, help. Hurry. I need you. What's going on? Jane was confused. Not much time. Important. His voice was weak and blinking and shaking. Jane became worried. She hung up and looked around. She had 2 hours before the evening news. She grabbed her handbag and rushed out, passing Hank, the director. He nodded okay to her. When Jane got to the hospital, she opened Billy's door quickly and bumped into a male nurse's aide coming out. In a hurry, he forced her aside, rushing out. Jane glanced down at the small, tough man who wore thick boots. Billy was awake, with tubes fitting into his arms. He fought to stay awake when he knew he was dying. Billy! Jane rushed to his side, sitting on the bed. You're going to be all right. She wiped his thick, wavy hair back. The 28-year-old was muscular, with dark hair and eyes. He had a sensitive face. Not much time, he spoke softly. Promise me, you won't stop investigating. It wasn't an accident. He gulped and reached out to feel her face. What do you mean? She took his hand and clutched it hard. They had become close friends. And Billy fought to stay awake. Somebody else had control of the car. Wasn't it the brakes? He shook his head slowly. Something else. Check the GPS on it. A device of some kind, I think. What? Someone tried to kill you? We got too close for him. He was staring at her. You're in danger, Jane. Be careful. He felt his life force leaving him. The guy who just left, he gulped hard, did something to my IV. I was just dozing. Oh my God. Tears came to Jane's eyes, really realizing the magnitude of it. I love you. I've wanted to tell you for a long time. They can do it to you too. Please take care of yourself. No. Jane couldn't stop her tears. No, Billy, you'll be all right. The tears rolled down her light cheeks. And then she yelled, we need a doctor in here. You're right to expose them. Jane, be careful. Billy, hang on. She saw his eyes close and his body went limp. His grip was tight on her. No, help, help, she yelled. Shaking her head, she couldn't believe what she heard. She pried her grip loose and backed away. Her whole body shook with fear for the first time in her life, and she felt responsible for his death. A nurse and doctor rushed in, bumping into Jane, who was backing away. They checked Billy, but there was no sign of life on the instruments. They shook heads and turned to Jane. Terrified, Jane turned and ran. It was late when she got home to her apartment. Nick was waiting for her. They sat on the sofa, and crying, Jane was in Nick's arms and told him everything. At 35, Nick was a light, smooth, and musical. He loved to be the center of attention and liked to have fun. Strong and agile, he had an expressive face. It's okay, he tried to reassure her. Maybe you should go. I'm dangerous to be around. You're too much fun to be around. Can't miss that. It's okay. Together we can make it. And shaking, Jane hugged him tightly. I'm so scared. And she felt responsible for everything. You're right to investigate. They need to be exposed. The more people know, the better. And Jane looked at him, remembering Billy told her to investigate as well. I wanted to tell you that your station is owned by Viacom, and 6 corporations own all the media outlets, and they're manipulating them to keep us in fear. And then Jane remembered Dean and Samuels mentioned a fear factor. It's all an illusion. He shook his head at Jane. And there's a lot of people who know what's going on. We're not alone. I don't understand. Why Billy? He never hurt anyone. Nick caressed her. He was like a little brother to me. Then she realized he did it on purpose to get to her. We can all change it. Then there was a knock on the door. And puzzled, they stared at each other because it was almost midnight. And Nick got up, going to the door. Who is it? He peeked out through the hole. Dean, is Jane there? Surprised, Jane stood up and wiped her tears. She opened the door for him. I heard about Billy. Dean stared at Jane. I'm so sorry, Jane. My office is bugged, and I can use your help. He looked at Nick, then Jane, and they let him in. Can this be true? Is it happening? You do a little research and decide. More stories are waiting for you. So, thanks for listening and thanks for watching.